For centuries, the galaxy believed that humans were extinct. Their worlds had been turned to dust, their fleets shattered, their people erased from history. The Galactic Dominion, a vast empire of powerful alien races, had ensured that humanity's name would never rise again. To the rulers of the Dominion, humans were nothing more than a mistake, an aggressive species that had been rightfully removed from existence. But they were wrong. Far beyond the mapped territories of the Dominion, in the cold and silent void of deep space, humanity was alive. They had not been destroyed. They had disappeared. They had hidden themselves so well that even the most advanced Dominion scanners failed to detect them. In the uncharted regions, beyond the reach of any empire, they had built their own worlds. These hidden colonies were not ruins of a broken civilization. They were thriving, growing stronger with each passing year. In the shadows, they had learned, adapted, and prepared. Humanity had not been resting. They had been waiting. A dying whisper, the last official record of humanity, came from over 300 years ago. The final battle had been brutal. The Dominion's forces had overwhelmed Earth's defenses. They had burned cities, wiped out entire colonies, and hunted down the last survivors. When the smoke cleared, nothing remained. No human ships, no signals, nothing. The galaxy moved on, believing the war was over. But deep within the void, hidden among asteroid fields and artificial nebulae, a single station still whispered through the dark. A station unlike any other, invisible to the Dominion sensors. Inside its steel walls, generations of humans had grown, trained, and studied. They had watched the Dominion rise to power, learned its weaknesses, and planned for the future. The hidden colonies. Humanity had not just survived. They had advanced. They had mastered stealth technology, developed energy sources beyond the Dominion's understanding, and created ships designed to strike and vanish like ghosts. While the Dominion became complacent, humanity sharpened its blades in the dark. The High Council, a group of the most brilliant human minds, had ruled these hidden colonies for centuries. They knew that one day humanity would return, but they also knew that time was not yet right. The Dominion was still too strong. Their forces were vast. Their influence stretched across the stars. A direct war would be suicide. So they waited. They expanded in secret, building fleets hidden beneath the surface of dead moons. They infiltrated Dominion networks, stealing data and learning every weakness of their enemies. They sent spies into alien worlds, gathering intelligence without ever being seen. Every move was careful, precise. And then everything changed. The first strike. One day, a Dominion patrol ship picked up a strange signal from an uncharted sector. It was weak, almost like an old distress beacon. The Dominion, curious but not concerned, sent a small scout team to investigate. When they arrived, they found something unexpected. A human research station, long abandoned but still intact. The Dominion officers laughed. Perhaps it was a relic of the past, a forgotten piece of human history. They prepared to take it apart, to add it to the archives as proof of their victory over mankind. But the moment they accessed the station's core, everything changed. A single message appeared on their screens, written in an old Earth language that no Dominion officer could understand. But the meaning was clear. "We are still here." Before they could react, the entire station exploded. A shockwave ripped through space, tearing their ships apart. The few survivors sent distress signals, but it was too late. The explosion had been no accident. It was a message. Humanity was no longer just watching. They were making their presence known. And this was just the beginning. The destruction of the Dominion patrol ship sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For centuries, the Galactic Dominion had ruled without fear. No species dared to challenge them. No enemy had survived their wrath. And yet something impossible had happened. A force had struck from the shadows, leaving no survivors. The Dominion dismissed it at first. Perhaps it was a malfunction, an accident, or an old human weapon that had been left behind and suddenly activated. But deep inside their high command, some leaders were uneasy. The message recovered from the explosion, "We are still here," was not something that could be ignored. Still, the Dominion did not believe humans could be responsible. They had spent centuries erasing humanity from history. To them, humans were extinct, a dead species, and the dead could not return. But they were wrong. In the depths of space, far from the Dominion's watchful eyes, beyond their most advanced scanners, the hidden colonies of humanity continued to grow. These secret worlds had been built in the most dangerous and isolated corners of the galaxy, inside dense asteroid fields, behind artificial nebulae, beneath the ice of frozen planets. The Dominion had never found them, and they never would. Inside these colonies, humanity had changed. They were no longer the desperate survivors of a lost war. They were warriors, engineers, and scientists working toward a single purpose: returning to the galaxy. In an underground command center on the hidden planet Vanguard, the High Council gathered. They had watched the destruction of the Dominion patrol ship. It was the first real strike against their enemy in over 300 years. But it was not an accident. A man named Darren Holt, a former soldier and now a leading strategist, stood before the council. His voice was steady, his eyes filled with determination. "The time is coming," he said. "The Dominion has grown weak. They have forgotten what fear feels like. We must remind them." The council members exchanged glances. Some nodded in agreement, while others remained silent. Dr. Elara Quinn, one of the oldest and wisest among them, leaned forward. "We cannot move too fast," she warned. "A single strike will not win us this war. We need patience." Darren nodded. "And we have been patient for centuries. But if we wait too long, we may lose our chance. The Dominion will start looking for us. We must be ready before they find us." The room fell silent. Then, from the shadows, another voice spoke. "They already know something is wrong." A tall man stepped forward, General Marcus Voss, the leader of humanity's secret fleet. His presence alone commanded respect. He had spent his entire life preparing for the day humans would rise again. "The Dominion is arrogant," Marcus continued, "but they are not fools. They will send scouts, spies, and maybe even full fleets to investigate. If they find us before we are ready, all of this will be for nothing." Dr. Quinn sighed. "Then what do you suggest?" Marcus looked at Darren, then at the rest of the council. His answer was simple. "We strike first." The Ghost Fleet, humanity's greatest weapon, was not its numbers, nor its technology. It was its ability to move unseen. Over the centuries, they had built a fleet unlike any other. Black-hulled ships, invisible to sensors, equipped with weapons far beyond anything the Dominion had encountered. They called it the Ghost Fleet. These ships did not fight in open battles. They did not announce their presence. They struck like shadows, disabling Dominion outposts, stealing supplies, and vanishing before alarms could be raised. Every mission weakened the Dominion little by little, preparing for the day when the war would begin in full. Now, it was time for the Ghost Fleet's first true test. Marcus turned to Darren. "I want you to lead the first operation." Darren hesitated for only a second before nodding. "What's the target?" Marcus pressed a button on the display screen. A holographic map appeared, showing a Dominion mining station orbiting a barren moon. This facility extracts a rare energy source, Therium crystals. The Dominion uses it to power their strongest warships. If we take it out, their fleets will be weaker. Darren studied the map. The station was heavily guarded, but nothing the Ghost Fleet couldn't handle. He looked up at Marcus. "When do we leave?" Marcus smiled. "Tonight. The first step toward war." As the Ghost Fleet prepared for its first mission, the Dominion unknowingly inched closer to discovering the truth. Their intelligence officers had already started investigating the destroyed patrol ship. Reports were coming in from distant sectors, whispers of ships that moved like ghosts, of Dominion soldiers disappearing without a trace. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion felt something they had long forgotten. Fear, and deep in the shadows of the hidden colonies, humanity was ready. Their return had begun. The Ghost Fleet moved like silent hunters through the darkness of space. Their black-hulled ships blended perfectly with the void, invisible to Dominion scanners. No radio signals, no energy spikes, just shadows drifting toward their target. Inside the lead ship, the Nightfall, Darren Holt stood on the bridge, eyes locked on the glowing red dot on the holographic map. The Dominion mining station. It orbited a lifeless moon, a massive facility extracting Terrian crystals, the rare energy source that powered the Dominion's strongest warships. If humanity wanted to weaken their enemy, this was the first step. General Marcus Voss's voice came through the communicator. Darren, you have one objective: disable the station, take what you can, and leave no trace. Darren nodded. Understood. We move in 5 minutes. Behind him, his team was already preparing. Samantha Riggs, the fleet's best pilot, sat at the controls, her fingers hovering over the navigation system. Beside her, Ryan Cole, a weapons expert, checked the ship's cloaking system. This is a high-risk mission, Ryan muttered. If they detect us. They won't, Samantha interrupted with a smirk. I can get us in and out before they even realize they're under attack. Darren gave a small smile. Let's make sure of that. He turned back to the holographic display. The Ghost Fleet was in position. It was time. Engage. The infiltration. The ships moved in complete silence, slipping past the Dominion's defense grid without a single alarm being triggered. The station was massive, floating in the darkness, surrounded by dozens of cargo ships transferring raw Terrium crystals to Dominion war factories. Darren's ship, the Nightfall, led the attack. As they approached, the team activated their EMP disruptors, cutting off the station's external communications. No distress signals, no warnings. The first strike was surgical. Ryan fired precision energy pulses, disabling the station's shield generators. In seconds, the entire facility was vulnerable. Docking now, Samantha whispered as she maneuvered the Nightfall toward the station's cargo bay. The ship latched onto the docking port, and the boarding ramp extended. Darren and his strike team rushed inside, weapons raised. The Dominion guards inside barely had time to react before they were stunned by non-lethal energy rounds. The humans moved quickly, securing the area. Dr. Elara Quinn's hacking team plugged into the station's mainframe, extracting data and stealing research files. Meanwhile, engineers began loading Terrian crystals onto their transport ships. Darren glanced at his timer. 5 minutes before Dominion reinforcements arrive. Move faster. The Discovery. As the team worked, one of the engineers called out, Commander, you need to see this. Darren rushed over and looked at the console screen. What he saw made his stomach turn. Human prisoners. Deep in the station's lower levels, hundreds of human slaves were locked in containment cells, forced to work for the Dominion. Some were old, others young. Their faces were thin, their eyes hollow. Darren clenched his fists. He had heard rumors that some humans had been captured during the war centuries ago, but no one had ever found proof. Until now. We're getting them out, Darren said firmly. But we don't have enough transport space, Ryan argued. We'll make space, Darren snapped. No one gets left behind. The team split up. Some continued loading the Terrian crystals, while others rushed to the lower levels to free the prisoners. The alarm sounds. Everything had gone smoothly. Until it didn't. A single Dominion guard, barely conscious, managed to activate the emergency beacon before Ryan could stop him. Sirens blared. Red warning lights flashed. Darren's communicator buzzed. Marcus's voice came through urgent. Darren, Dominion ships are heading your way. You have 4 minutes. Understood, Darren responded. He turned to his team. Everyone, move. Now. The freed prisoners, weak but determined, followed the strike team to the docking bay. Samantha was already preparing for takeoff. Cargo loaded. An engineer reported. Prisoners on board, another confirmed. Darren looked at Ryan. Detonate the charges. Ryan grinned and pressed the detonator. Explosions ripped through the station, destroying vital power cores and sending debris flying into space. As Dominion warships arrived, the Ghost Fleet vanished into the void, leaving behind nothing but wreckage. The aftermath. The Dominion was in chaos. Their most valuable Terrian crystal station had been destroyed. Their prisoners had been freed. And worst of all, their greatest enemy, the one they had believed to be extinct, had just struck a blow they could not ignore. In their hidden base, the High Council received the mission report. Dr. Quinn studied the stolen data carefully. "This is bigger than we thought," she murmured. "The Dominion is hiding something." Marcus crossed his arms. "Then we find out what it is." Darren sat quietly, watching the freed prisoners being treated by medics. They had suffered for generations under the Dominion's rule. No more. Humanity was not just fighting for revenge. They were fighting for their people. And this was only the beginning. The destruction of the Terrian Crystal Station sent shockwaves through the Galactic Dominion. Their most valuable energy facility had been wiped out, their supply chain crippled, and worst of all, there were whispers of an impossible enemy. The Dominion High Command met in a secret chamber on their capital planet, Vorlek Prime. The room was dim, filled with holographic displays showing the wreckage of the mining station. Several high-ranking officers stood around a circular table, their faces tense. Grand Marshal Cyrus, the supreme military leader of the Dominion, spoke first. His deep voice carried across the room like a storm. "We lost an entire station, hundreds of workers, and a valuable fleet," he growled. "Who is responsible for this?" One of his intelligence officers, Commander Rethar, hesitated before answering. "We believe it was humans." The room fell silent. A lower-ranking officer scoffed. "Impossible. Humans were wiped out 3 centuries ago." Cyrus narrowed his eyes, then explained the message left behind. With a wave of his clawed hand, a hologram flickered to life. On the wreckage of the station, scrawled in old human language, were 3 simple words: "We are back." For the first time in centuries, fear crept into the hearts of the Dominion's leaders. Back in the shadows, far away in the hidden human colonies, the Ghost Fleet had returned home. The mission was a success, but there was no celebration. Darren Holt sat in a debriefing room, his mind replaying the faces of the freed human prisoners. Their eyes, filled with pain and exhaustion, haunted him. General Marcus Voss entered the room. "You did well, Darren." Darren looked up. "Did we? We hit 1 station, freed a few hundred people. But how many more are still out there? How many more humans are suffering?" Marcus placed a data tablet on the table. "That's what we need to find out." Darren picked up the tablet and scanned through the stolen files. His hands clenched into fists. The Dominion had multiple prison camps across the galaxy. Humans were still alive, enslaved, experimented on, used as laborers in secret factories. Dr. Ilara Quinn entered the room, her face serious. "The data confirms what we feared. The Dominion never destroyed all of humanity. They kept survivors and used them in ways we never imagined." Marcus's expression darkened. "That means we can't just fight for revenge. We fight to save our people." Darren looked between them. "What's the next move?" Ilara tapped the tablet. "There's a Dominion prison transport ship leaving a remote sector in 3 days. It's carrying over 500 human captives. If we intercept it, we can rescue them before they reach their destination." Marcus nodded. "Then we move. We strike again." The trap. 3 days later, the Ghost Fleet waited in the shadow of a dying star. The prison transport ship, the Dreadwing, approached, escorted by 3 Dominion warships. Darren sat in the cockpit of the Nightfall, watching the enemy fleet through his ship's sensors. "This won't be as easy as the mining station," Ryan muttered. They'll be expecting an attack. Darren took a deep breath. That's why we're going to outthink them. The Ghost Fleet had developed a new strategy, one the Dominion had never seen before. Instead of attacking head-on, they hacked into the Dominion's navigation system and planted false signals. As the Dreadwing approached a nearby asteroid belt, it suddenly received an emergency distress call from a Dominion ship that didn't exist. Dominion vessels, we are under attack, requesting immediate assistance near Sector 17. The warships broke formation and rushed toward the fake distress signal, leaving the Dreadwing alone. That was the moment Darren and his team struck. The Nightfall and two other stealth ships uncloaked and fired electromagnetic pulses, disabling the Dreadwing's engines and communication systems. Within seconds, the massive ship was drifting helplessly in space. Darren and his strike team boarded the vessel, moving quickly through the dark hallways. The Dominion guards inside were caught off guard, unable to call for backup. One by one, they were neutralized with stun weapons. Darren reached the main prison hold and looked through the reinforced glass. Hundreds of humans sat in metal cages, their eyes filled with fear. "We're here to get you out," Darren said as he and his team started unlocking the cells. The prisoners hesitated for a moment, then realized the truth. Their own kind had returned. They were no longer alone. One of the older prisoners, a frail man with silver hair, stepped forward. His voice trembled. You are humans." Darren nodded. "Yes, and we're taking you home." The war begins. As the freed prisoners were loaded onto the Ghost Fleet ships, the Dominion warships realized the trap and turned back. "They're coming in fast," Samantha warned from the Nightfall's controls. Darren pressed his communicator. "All ships, prepare for emergency jump." As the first Dominion warship opened fire, the Ghost Fleet activated their hyperdrives and vanished, leaving nothing behind but an empty prison ship. The message spreads. News of the attack spread across the galaxy. Dominion officers scrambled to cover up the truth, but whispers began to grow. Humanity had not only returned, they were winning. On Vorlek Prime, Grand Marshal Xyros watched the reports in silence. His claws dug into the armrest of his chair. "This is no longer just an inconvenience," he growled. "The humans must be eliminated." But deep in the shadows, hidden from the Dominion's eyes, humanity was stronger than ever. And they were just getting started. The rescue mission had been a success. The Ghost Fleet had escaped with over 500 freed human prisoners, striking another blow against the Galactic Dominion. But there was no time for celebration. Inside the underground command center on Vanguard, humanity's hidden world, the High Council gathered once again. General Marcus Voss stood at the center of the war room, his eyes scanning the holographic display of the galaxy. Red dots marked Dominion-controlled worlds. Blue dots marked the few places where humanity still had influence. The balance of power was still against them, but that was starting to change. Dr. Ilara Quinn adjusted her glasses as she spoke. "The rescued prisoners have provided valuable intelligence. The Dominion has more human captives than we imagined. They are not just using them for labor." She paused, looking at the council members. "They are experimenting on them." A heavy silence filled the room. Darren Holt, still in his battle gear from the last mission, clenched his fists. "We have to stop them." Marcus nodded. "We will. But we can't just keep hitting small targets. The Dominion is beginning to take us seriously." Samantha Riggs, the best pilot in the fleet, leaned forward. "So what's the plan?" "Hit something bigger." Marcus tapped the holographic map. A large red marker pulsed near the center of Dominion space. "This is Outpost Zeta 5, one of the Dominion's main communication hubs. It connects their entire eastern sector and keeps their fleets coordinated. If we take it out, their warships will be scattered, unable to respond quickly." Ryan Cole, the weapons expert, whistled. "That's a bold move. And risky." Ilara adjusted the display, showing more details of the outpost. "It's heavily guarded. A direct attack would be suicide." Marcus gave a small smile. That's why we won't attack it directly. We'll infiltrate it from the inside. The mission begins. 3 days later, the Nightfall and a small strike team traveled through deep space, approaching Outpost Zeta 5 under the cover of a disguised Dominion transport ship. Darren, Samantha, Ryan, and 2 engineers wore stolen Dominion officer uniforms, blending in as the ship docked at the outpost. As the airlock opened, a Dominion security officer greeted them. His reptilian eyes scanned their identification cards. "You're late," he growled. Darren kept his face emotionless. "Had a minor issue with the cargo scanners. All clear now." The officer gave a grunt and waved them through. "Get moving." Once inside, the team split up. Darren and Ryan headed toward the main control room, while Samantha and the engineers moved to disable the station's defensive systems. The sabotage. The outpost was massive, with hundreds of Dominion officers walking through the halls. But the human team had planned every step carefully. Darren and Ryan reached the control room, where Dominion technicians monitored fleet movements across the sector. Ryan pulled out a small signal disruptor and activated it. Within seconds, the security cameras and alarms went offline. Darren moved fast, stunning the 2 nearest officers before they could react. Ryan disabled the others with precision shots. "We're in," Darren whispered into his communicator. "Samantha, status." In another part of the outpost, Samantha and the engineers were working near the power generators. She placed explosive charges along the main conduits and grinned. "Charges set. This place is going dark in 2 minutes." Darren turned to the control panels. He inserted a data spike, allowing Ilara and the team back on Vanguard to hack into the outpost's systems. Ilara's voice came through the communicator. "We're inside. Downloading all Dominion fleet movements now." The mission was going perfectly, until everything went wrong. The alarm is raised. A Dominion patrol officer entered the control room, saw the unconscious technicians, and immediately sounded the alarm. Within seconds, the entire station flashed red. Sirens blared. Security teams rushed toward the control room. Ryan cursed. "We're out of time." Darren grabbed the data spike and turned to his communicator. "Samantha, blow the charges. Now." A second later, explosions shook the outpost. The lights flickered and emergency power kicked in. The Ghost Fleet's stealth ships uncloaked, opening fire on the outpost's exterior defenses. Darren and Ryan fought their way through the halls, stunning guards as they ran. They met up with Samantha and the engineers near the docking bay, where the Nightfall waited. "Go, go, go," Samantha yelled as they sprinted up the ramp. The ship's engines roared to life as Dominion fighters tried to block their escape. But Samantha was the best pilot in the fleet. She spun the Nightfall into a tight roll, dodging laser fire, and blasted into hyperspace just before enemy reinforcements arrived. The aftermath. Back at Vanguard, the team gathered around a large display as Ilara analyzed the stolen data. "We did more than just disable their communication hub," she said. "We found something much bigger." She pulled up a new file. A Dominion research facility on a distant planet, a place where the worst human experiments were being conducted. Ryan's expression darkened. "What are they doing there?" Ilara hesitated before answering. "They are testing something. Trying to create a weapon using human genetics." Darren exhaled slowly. "Then that's our next target." Marcus nodded. "The war is truly beginning now." Far away, in the Dominion's capital, Grand Marshal Cyrus received the report. His fury was uncontrollable. "Enough," he snarled. "Prepare the full force of the Dominion Armada. We will wipe them out." The war had begun, and there was no turning back. The stolen Dominion data had revealed something terrifying. A secret research facility where humans were being experimented on. It was hidden on a remote planet called Draxus 4, far from major trade routes, deep in enemy territory. In the underground command center on Vanguard, the Ghost Fleet's leadership gathered. A holographic image of Draxus 4 hovered above the war table. Dr. Elara Quinn adjusted her glasses as she spoke. This facility isn't just another prison. The Dominion is experimenting on human captives, using their DNA to create a new kind of weapon. Ryan Cole, the weapons expert, crossed his arms. What kind of weapon? Elara took a deep breath. We don't know yet, but whatever they're working on, the Dominion is keeping it heavily guarded. That means it's important. General Marcus Voss leaned forward. Then we destroy it. Darren Holt, still recovering from the last mission, studied the hologram. We can't just blow it up. There are humans inside. We need to rescue them first. Samantha Riggs, their best pilot, smirked. Another high-risk mission. Sounds fun. Marcus nodded. We move in fast and quiet. No mistakes. The approach. 3 days later, the Nightfall and 2 stealth ships hovered in orbit over Draxus 4, cloaked against Dominion sensors. The planet below was covered in dark clouds, its surface rocky and barren. Darren and his strike team prepared in the cargo bay, checking their weapons and gear. The plan was simple. Get in, rescue the prisoners, and destroy the facility before the Dominion could react. Elara's voice came through the communicator. I've hacked the Dominion patrol schedule. You have a 12-minute window before the next security sweep. Copy that, Darren responded. He looked at his team. Ryan, Samantha, and a squad of elite soldiers. Let's move. The ship's side hatch opened, and they jumped from the Nightfall, their descent slowed by stealth thrusters. They landed softly on the rocky surface, just outside the facility's perimeter. The facility was a massive metal fortress built into the side of a mountain. Bright red security lights flashed across the area, and armed Dominion guards patrolled the entrance. Darren signaled to Ryan, who pulled out a disruption device. He activated it, and for a few seconds, the security cameras glitched. That was all they needed. The team rushed forward, using stun weapons to take down the guards silently. Within moments, they'd reached the main entrance. Samantha hacked the door panel, and with a soft hiss, the heavy metal doors slid open. They were in. The horror inside. The hallways were cold and sterile, filled with blinking control panels and Dominion scientists in dark robes. The team moved quickly, avoiding patrols and heading toward the prison sector. As they entered the detention area, they saw rows of glass chambers, each holding a human inside. Some were unconscious, others barely alive. Ryan's face darkened. What have they done to them? Elara's voice came through the comms. They've been experimenting with human DNA, trying to enhance strength, endurance, even intelligence. But the process is painful and deadly. Darren clenched his fists. We're getting them out. He and his team began opening the chambers, helping the weak and injured prisoners to their feet. One of them, a woman with silver hair, grabbed Darren's arm. Her voice was weak but urgent. You have to. Stop it. Stop what? Darren asked. She pointed to a reinforced door at the end of the hall. The prototype. It's not human anymore. Darren exchanged a look with Ryan. If the Dominion had already created their weapon, this mission had just become even more dangerous. The monster awakens. Darren signaled 2 soldiers to continue evacuating the prisoners while he, Ryan, and Samantha moved toward the reinforced door. Ryan placed an explosive charge on the lock. Stand back. The door blew open with a thunderous boom, revealing a dark chamber filled with tanks of strange liquid. In the center of the room stood a hulking figure, trapped inside a massive containment pod. It was humanoid, but its skin was dark and metallic. Its eyes glowed with a faint blue light. A Dominion scientist turned in shock. You don't understand. He's unstable. If you let him out. Darren didn't hesitate. He stunned the scientist and moved toward the control panel. Elara, what is this thing? He asked. Elara's voice was urgent. It was once human, but the Dominion used genetic enhancements to turn it into a weapon. Stronger, faster, nearly indestructible. Ryan shook his head. So what do we do? Kill it. Darren hesitated. Then the choice was made for him. The containment pod cracked. A deep, rumbling sound echoed through the room as the glass shattered. The creature inside opened its glowing eyes. Then it roared. Escape and destruction. The monster lunged, moving with unnatural speed. Darren barely dodged as its metallic claws slashed through the air. "Fall back," he shouted. Ryan fired his energy rifle, but the shots bounced off the creature's skin. Samantha tapped her communicator. "We have a problem. A big one." Ilara's voice came back. "You have 3 minutes before Dominion reinforcements arrive. You need to get out now." Darren gritted his teeth. There was no time to fight. They needed to destroy the facility and bury this thing forever. Samantha set the charges. She planted high-energy explosives along the lab walls while Darren and Ryan kept the creature distracted. Then they ran. Alarms blared as they raced back to the main hall, where the rescued prisoners were being loaded onto escape ships. Samantha pressed the detonator. A massive explosion shook the ground as fire and smoke erupted from the facility. The Ghost Fleet ships took off, escaping into the sky just as the entire lab collapsed into flames. As the Nightfall entered hyperspace, Darren sat back, breathing hard. The mission was a success. The prisoners were free. The Dominion's experiments were destroyed. But something felt wrong. Ryan looked at him. "That thing, do you think it survived?" Darren didn't answer. But deep down, he knew. The Dominion's weapon was still out there, and it wouldn't stop hunting them. The mission on Draxus 4 had been a success. At least, that's what everyone wanted to believe. The Dominion research facility had been destroyed, and the prisoners were safe aboard the Ghost Fleet's hidden ships. But Darren Holt couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As the Nightfall cruised through hyperspace back to Vanguard, he sat in the dimly lit briefing room, staring at a holoscreen displaying reports on the Dominion's weapon, the prototype. Ryan Cole entered the room, his arms crossed. "You haven't slept." Darren didn't look away from the screen. "I can't stop thinking about it. That thing, it wasn't just some experiment. It was built for one purpose, to hunt and destroy humans." Ryan sighed and sat down across from him. "We blew up the facility. It's gone." Darren finally met his gaze. "Are you sure?" Ryan didn't answer, because deep down, he wasn't sure either. Strange signals. Back on Vanguard, Dr. Ilara Quinn sat in her lab, analyzing the data they had recovered from the Dominion's computers. As she sifted through the files, her screen flickered. A strange signal pulsed through the system, a faint transmission coming from deep space. Her eyes widened. "No, it can't be." She quickly activated the comms link. "General Marcus, you need to see this." Minutes later, Marcus, Darren, Ryan, and Samantha gathered around her computer. "What is it?" Marcus asked. Ilara pointed to the signal. "This transmission is coming from a Dominion black zone, an uncharted sector where no official records exist." Ryan frowned, and Ilara swallowed. "It's using human DNA markers, the same markers we saw in the prototype." The room fell silent. Darren clenched his jaw. "It's alive." Samantha leaned against the table. "We destroyed the facility. How did it escape?" Ilara shook her head. "I don't know. But whatever this thing is, it's moving. And it's tracking something." Marcus exhaled. "It's tracking us." The silent chase. The Ghost Fleet had always been good at hiding. But now, something was hunting them. Marcus ordered the fleet to change position, moving to a hidden asteroid base on the far edge of the galaxy. The plan was simple: stay ahead of the enemy and gather more information. But the signals kept coming. No matter where they moved, the transmissions followed. Always faint, always distant, but never disappearing. Darren sat in the cockpit of the Nightfall, staring at the star map. "It's not chasing us like a normal fleet would." Samantha, who was piloting, glanced at him. "What do you mean?" Darren's fingers hovered over the display. A Dominion warship would send scouts, use faster ships to track us. But this thing, it's moving slowly, directly toward us, like it already knows where we are. Ryan leaned forward. So it's not searching. It's following a signal. Ilara's voice came through the ship's comms. I think I know how. The marked prisoners. Back on Vanguard, Ilara gathered the team in the medical bay. One of the rescued prisoners from Draxus 4, a young woman named Hessa, lay on the examination table. Ilara pointed to a small implant embedded in the back of her neck. The Dominion injected these into their prisoners. It's a biotracker. Samantha's eyes widened. That's how it's finding us. Marcus frowned. Can we remove it? Ilara nodded. Yes, but if we deactivate the signal, the prototype will know. Darren exhaled. So we have two choices: run and hope it never catches us, or face it before it finds Vanguard. A heavy silence filled the room. Then Marcus spoke. We set a trap. The ambush. The Ghost Fleet devised a dangerous plan. They would remove the tracker from Tessa, place it inside an empty decoy ship, and send it to a desolate moon in the middle of an asteroid field. If the prototype was truly following the signal, it would go straight to the trap. And when it did, they would destroy it. The arrival. 3 days later, the trap was set. The decoy ship drifted silently above the moon, its engines cold, its systems transmitting the false signal. The Ghost Fleet's warships hid among the asteroids, weapons charged, waiting. Then it arrived. A dark figure emerged from hyperspace, a Dominion stealth vessel, silent and deadly. The prototype was inside. Darren, watching from the bridge of the Nightfall, gripped the controls. It took the bait. Marcus' voice came through the comms. Hold fire. We need to be sure. The Dominion ship approached the decoy. It didn't scan it. It didn't hesitate. It knew the signal was fake. Suddenly, the ship's hull rippled, and the prototype burst out. It no longer looked human. Its body had grown, its metallic skin reflecting the starlight. Its eyes glowed brighter, filled with intelligence and hatred. It turned its head, scanning the asteroid field. And then, it spoke. I see you. Darren's breath caught in his throat. It had been a trap, but not for the prototype. For them, the attack. Before anyone could react, the prototype raised its arms and unleashed a shockwave that disabled the fleet's cloaking systems. Suddenly, from the shadows of space, Dominion warships appeared, dozens of them. They had been waiting. Marcus shouted over the comms. It's an ambush. All ships, prepare for battle. Darren turned to Samantha. Get us out of here, now. But as the engines roared to life, the prototype leaped from its ship, landing on the hull of the Nightfall. Its glowing eyes stared into the cockpit. It had found them, and it was not going to let them escape. The prototype clung to the hull of the Nightfall, its glowing eyes staring through the cockpit window. Its metallic body pulsed with power, and its claws scraped against the ship's surface, sending out sparks. Inside, Darren Holt and Samantha Riggs froze. Then the prototype moved. With terrifying speed, it punched through the hull, its sharp fingers piercing the metal like paper. Alarms blared. We're losing pressure, Samantha shouted, gripping the controls. Darren grabbed his weapon. We need to get it off the ship. Now. But outside, the battle had already begun. The trap closes. The Ghost Fleet had walked into an ambush. Dominion warships emerged from the asteroid field, their weapons charging. Plasma cannons fired, lighting up the darkness of space. From the command ship, General Marcus Voss gave the order. All ships, evasive maneuvers, engage the enemy. The hidden warships of the Ghost Fleet sprang into action, returning fire. Explosions rocked the asteroid field as fighters weaved between the debris, dodging enemy attacks. But the Dominion's forces were strong, too strong, and at the center of it all was the prototype, a desperate plan. Inside the Nightfall, The pressure alarm screamed louder. The breach in the hull was getting worse. Samantha fought to keep the ship stable. We can't fly like this. That thing will tear us apart. Darren clenched his jaw. We need to lure it outside. He activated his comms. Ryan, get to the airlock. We're about to eject this thing into space. Ryan Cole was already moving. He sprinted through the corridors, grabbing a heavy railgun. I'm on it. Darren turned to Samantha. On my signal, open the outer hatch. She nodded, hands ready on the controls. Darren took a deep breath. Then he hit the intercom. Hey, monster. You do E-N-T-M-E. Come and G-T-M-E. The prototype's head snapped toward the sound. Then, it lunged. The airlock showdown. Darren ran through the corridor, leading the prototype to the airlock. Behind him, the walls shook as the creature moved, its heavy steps denting the floor. Ryan was waiting at the airlock door, gun raised. Come on, come on. Darren dived through the door just as the prototype crashed inside. Now, Darren shouted. Samantha hit the emergency override, and the airlock doors sealed shut. For a second, the prototype paused, realizing it had been trapped. Then, Samantha opened the outer hatch. A massive force ripped through the room as air was sucked into the vacuum of space. The prototype grabbed onto the walls, its metallic fingers digging deep. Its glowing eyes burned with rage as it clung to the ship. Ryan aimed the railgun. Boom. The shot hit the prototype square in the chest, sending it flying into the darkness of space. The airlock slammed shut, restoring pressure to the ship. Darren collapsed to the ground, breathing hard. Tell me the thing is gone. Samantha checked the sensors. It's drifting. But I don't think we killed it. Ryan reloaded his gun. Then we better make sure it never comes back. The Ghost Fleet fights back. Meanwhile, the battle outside raged on. Marcus barked orders over the comms. All ships, focus fire on the Dominion's command vessel. The Ghost Fleet's fighters swarmed the Dominion warships, weaving through enemy fire. The Vanguard unleashed a massive barrage, taking down 2 enemy cruisers. Samantha, now back in control of the Nightfall, pushed the engines to max. We're back in the fight. Darren strapped in. Let's even the odds. The Nightfall soared into battle, its cannons firing at full power. It took out enemy fighters one by one, clearing a path toward the Dominion's command ship. Marcus gave the final order. All ships, fire. A massive explosion erupted as the Ghost Fleet's combined firepower tore through the Dominion flagship, causing it to detonate in a fiery blast. The remaining Dominion ships, seeing their leader destroyed, retreated into hyperspace. A moment of silence filled the battlefield. Then, cheers erupted over the comms. Darren leaned back in his seat, exhaling. We did it. But it's not over. Back in the darkness of space, the prototype drifted, motionless. For a moment, it seemed lifeless. Then, its eyes flickered back on. It raised its claw, activated its thrusters, and slowly turned toward Vanguard's direction. It wasn't finished yet. The battle was over. The Dominion fleet had retreated, and the Ghost Fleet had survived. But Darren Holt knew the war wasn't won yet. The prototype was still alive. As the Nightfall docked back at Vanguard, Darren, Samantha, Ryan, and General Marcus gathered in the war room. Elara Quinn stood at the center, analyzing the data on her screen. She looked up, her face pale. The prototype isn't gone. Marcus frowned. We saw it drift into space. It should be dead. Elara shook her head. It's regenerating. And worse, it's coming for us. A silence fell over the room. Darren clenched his fists. Then we end this. No more running. Marcus nodded. Agreed. But how do we stop something that refuses to die? Elara took a deep breath. I think I know. A dangerous plan. Elara tapped her screen, showing an image of the prototype's core, a glowing, pulsing energy source inside its chest. This is the key, she explained. It's an experimental fusion core. If we can overload it, we can destroy the prototype from the inside. Ryan crossed his arms. And how do we do that? Ilara looked at Darren. Someone has to get close enough to plant an EMP charge directly on its core. Samantha's eyes widened. You want us to get close to that thing? Darren exhaled. It's risky, but it's our only chance. Marcus placed a hand on Darren's shoulder. You don't have to do this alone. Darren smirked. Good, because I wasn't planning to. The final battle begins. The Ghost Fleet's warships repositioned, preparing for the prototype's arrival. Vanguard's shields were at full power, and every soldier was armed. The plan was simple. Lure the prototype into a trap, weaken it, and then deliver the final blow. Then, it came. A shadow appeared on the scanners, moving at impossible speed. The prototype had returned. It crashed onto Vanguard's surface, its claws tearing through the outer hull. Alarms blared as defense turrets opened fire. But the prototype was stronger than before. It ripped apart the turrets, its glowing eyes burning with fury. Inside the command center, Marcus shouted, It's breached the station. Everyone, fall back to defensive positions. Darren, Ryan, and Samantha rushed toward the lower decks, where the prototype was tearing through the corridors. Ryan armed his rifle. This thing just won't stop. Darren pulled out the EMP charge. Then we make sure it does. The trap. The team lured the prototype into a cargo bay, where a containment field was ready. Samantha called over the comms. Now. Marcus activated the controls. Energy barriers snapped into place, trapping the prototype inside. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, the prototype roared, releasing a shockwave that shattered the containment field. Darren's eyes widened. It's adapting. The prototype lunged forward. Ryan fired his rifle, hitting its shoulder, but the creature barely flinched. Samantha threw an explosive, knocking it back, but it regenerated instantly. Darren sprinted forward, dodging the prototype's claw, and leaped onto its back. It roared and tried to shake him off, but he held on tight. With one quick motion, Darren planted the EMP charge on the prototype's core. Then he jumped away. Now, he shouted. Samantha hit the detonator. The charge activated, sending out a massive energy pulse that shut down the prototype's systems. It staggered, its body twitching, its glowing eyes flickering. But it wasn't over yet. With one final burst of strength, the prototype lunged toward Darren. Ryan fired again, hitting its legs, but it kept moving. Marcus' voice came through the comms. Weapons locked. Firing main cannon. A bright beam of energy blasted through the walls, hitting the prototype directly in the chest. The explosion tore through its core. The prototype let out a final, piercing screech, and then its body collapsed into dust. It was over. The aftermath. Silence filled the air as the dust settled. Darren, breathing heavily, looked at the empty spot where the prototype had stood. Ryan clapped a hand on his shoulder. You actually did it. Samantha grinned. We all did. Marcus' voice came over the comms. Ghost Fleet, report. Is it gone? Darren smiled. It's gone, General. A wave of cheers erupted through the station. The war wasn't over, but the biggest threat was finally destroyed. Ilara's voice came through the speakers. The Dominion will come looking for it. Darren smirked. Then we'll be ready. The Ghost Fleet had survived the impossible. And now, it was time to take the fight to the Dominion. Humanity was back. And this time, they weren't hiding anymore. The end.